All right, good afternoon, everyone. If those of you who are eating lunch, please continue. Shh. There's nothing much I can do to stop you from eating, God forbid. But if you're finished eating, come and join us here in the front so we can have a conversation for just a bit and to continue to talk about the important themes that Adam has raised for us this morning. So wish everyone Shabbat Shalom. I understand there's some people from other synagogues here, so welcome. We're delighted you're here. And hope you enjoyed Kiddush this morning. Good. How many of you were born in the United States or raised in the United States? Raise hands. Raised in the United States. All right, hands down. How many people were born in Iran or raised in Iran? Okay, hands down. How many people born and raised in Israel? Okay, hands down. Anyone born or raised in Europe? Okay, all right, now we're going to continue this. Okay, those of you who were born in America, shh. Those of you born in America, okay? How many people who are born in America, let's put hands up if you're born in America. All right, keep your hand up if you had a confrontation with anti-Semitism when you were a kid. Kid called you a dirty Jew, something was scrawled on your locker, almost everybody, all right? Keep your hand up. Those born in America, keep your hand up if you've ever had a confrontation with anti-Semitism in your workplace. Okay? Interesting. Okay? Last one. Keep your hand up if you've ever had a confrontation with anti-Semitism among people you thought were your friends. Interesting. Okay? Hands down. People, all of those who were born in Iran, raise hands again. Okay? How many of you had confrontations with anti-Semitism when you were kids? Okay? Good. Well, you're here, so you must have said something, right? All right, those born in Europe, hands up in Europe, right? How many of you had confrontations with anti-Semitism as a child? Almost everybody. Okay, good. Not good. I just wanted to see that. That's not good. That's not. Okay. I want to welcome once again Adam Milstein. Thank you for your presentation this morning.
My pleasure.
It's your first time out, so it was very, very good. I want to pursue some of the themes that you raised and ask you to reflect with me and perhaps reflect with this community as well. So, one of the differences between the world we live in today and the world we lived in even a generation ago that I think has contributed to the spread of anti-Semitism is social media. It used to be that if you had a crazy, hateful guy in some corner of the country, he was a crazy, hateful guy in some corner of the country, and it would be hard for, number one, it might be hard for him to connect with other crazy, hateful people, and number two, it would be hard for him to spread his ideas. But now with social media, you have the capacity to spread ideas really instantaneously and really cheaply. So in your vision of the spread of anti-Semitism, what do you think is the effect of social media? And then to get to your really important point is, what can we do about that?
Thank you, Rabbi, for inviting me. And social media. So I am actually a little bit of a maven in social media. I'm a maven in many things. I feel in order to influence, you need to understand what you're doing. So if anybody is following Twitter here, I have about 110,000 followers, and I have about the same amount of people that following me or like my page on Facebook. So I'm considered an influencer, and indeed, people today can express themselves, can reach big crowds through social media. I think it's we see a lot of social media. The white supremacists, which I don't think white supremacists are in many numbers, but through social media, they finally can express themselves and they can connect with each other, and they're very, very active on social media. So it's a lot of people from the progressive field, the left, they're more the educated people, and they tend to really engage in social media and follow each other and comment on each other. So we see a lot of activity in social media for sure. The question is, really, how many of us are really following social media? If you're on social media, you follow social media. Sometimes the newspaper are picking it up, but I don't think social media is such a prevailing thing for all of us. But there's no question, Rabbi, that today with social media, any one of us can reach huge crowds. So I try to use my presence on social media to promote ideas and things I believe in, and so are other people. And sometimes my engagement on a tweet can be a few thousands or a few hundreds of thousands. So I think it really give me a big loudspeaker and others to be on social media. Clearly, the organization that are managing the social media, the Google and the Facebook and the Twitters of the world, are playing gods. They decide what's proper for social media, what's proper for them, and what's not proper for them. They try all the time to perfect. They have their own biases. They try to perfect themselves, and it will continue to be a game like anything else to regulate it. The Congress tried to regulate it. Yesterday, the killing that took place in New Zealand was live on Facebook. The killer had attached a camera to his head, and he was actually videotaping how he was killing people. And it was live on Facebook. And today there is a lot of criticism that Facebook allowed those type of killers to really expose themselves and what they do and be glorified all over the world. So I'm sure Facebook is going to take some measures. So is Google and YouTube and Twitter. It's constant struggle of they try to be free speech and independent, and everybody else asking them to show some responsibility and I think being adult. So it will be curtailed, but it's going to be the most popular way to receive information. All the written media will disappear. We'll get some media from the major newspaper. Most of the media will be pushed to us by the social media channels.
So what do you, well, let's put it this way. What do you think are the steps that we need to take? So on the one hand, Facebook, you're right, Facebook, Google, they maintain a certain neutrality, even to some very vicious kinds of stuff. So the question is, should it come from government? Should it come from the consumer community? Is there a way to influence these corporations as businesses to get them to take that step of responsibility? And in the same way that hate speech is outlawed in certain social circumstances, to begin to police the social media world and police it for hate speech.
Thank you, Rabbi. I think in my speech I tried to say that I tend to stay and speak about things that can make an impact. I have opinions like many people, but I think where I excel is in my actions. So I try to just talk and do things that I understand and that I can make an impact. For me to tell Facebook or Twitter or YouTube what to do, they even, limiting my ability to express myself. So I just do the thing I can do, and I don't deal with the big things. And so I think it's a little bit outside of my league to really see a solution for these issues.
Okay. Still, I think that's a domain that we ought to think about together as a community, because I don't think you're going to stop the spread of hatred until you figure out. I don't want to curtail free speech on the web, but I do think that there are certain limits. I mean, Facebook did eventually take down the video of the guy murdering people in New Zealand. So this becomes an interesting question. Let me turn to a different...
But let me just answer.
Go ahead, please.
One of the activities that I have presented here is that we need to use intelligence, and Israel is a superpower when it comes to intelligence. I'm talking about open source intelligence. That means take things from Facebook, take things from Twitter, take things from Google, YouTube, and use it to analyze who's the enemy, what they're planning, who's funding them, what they're doing. So with I think the expansion of social media, so is our ability to track our enemies on social media. The fact that there is a social media, they come and present themselves and present their plans. So it's giving us the opportunity to track them and to maybe prevent some attacks. If they have done it in their garage with nobody knowing what they're doing, then nobody would have known what they're doing in advance. But today, with social media, we can know much more and be more prepared for potential violence.
It's not just violence, though. I think it's also attitudes. I mean, the killer in New Zealand apparently was a disciple of a British fascist writer, and drew certain inspiration from certain American sources. So the question is, how do you maintain at least an awareness of the flow of those kinds of ideas across the internet, so that we can at least, if you can't police them, at least to know where they are and to know how they're spreading around the.
I think we can monitor, but as I said here, those radical movements that their goal is to destroy Western civilization, while they themselves don't promote violence, they promote the fact that all means are kosher. And there are many, many radicals, like the guy in New Zealand, that felt that he has the justification and also the support of bigger people than him, whether it's the president or whether it's this philosopher from England or whether it's Candace Owen, at giving that he's much bigger than just a killer in New Zealand. And so we need to understand that the radical movements are the source of the bad in the world. And I'm trying to focus on those radical movements and the violence that they incite, whether they know it or not. So I'm mostly really focused on the violence, the potential terrorism. I can't really change ideas and opinions of people. For me, I'm too small for it. I'm trying to focus what I can do.
I understand. Let's take another area where I think it's you mentioned this, and I know it's an area that you've worked on very hard, and that's college campuses. So on college campuses, you had over the last decade a rise in the BDS movement and a battle between pro-BDS and anti-BDS movements. This very week, the faculty of Pitzer College voted a pro-BDS initiative, and the president of the college squashed it, sent a letter to the community saying he wouldn't allow this to become characteristic of his college. And elsewhere around the country, there's been a battle. So give us a sense right now, and I know this is stuff you're very much in touch with, where is the battle against BDS on campus? Are we winning? Are we losing? And what can we do?
I think we clearly lost the battle on BDS on campus, and the BDSers have moved out of the campus, and now we have anti-Semitism all in the United States. What the BDSers have done very well is to present the Palestinian-Israeli conflict as a human rights crisis. Israel is the apartheid state. Israel is the genocidal state. Israel commit war crime. And by doing so, they were able to connect to many other groups on campus. So today, the people that are against the state of Israel, what we call the BDSers, are now really in coalition with many, many progressive groups. And when they come to pass a BDS resolution, it's really not about Israel. They bring a lot of issues and they boycott a lot of things. Many, many times they boycotted the United States in the same resolution that they boycott Israel. They're all united, they're against so many different things. The Arabs help the other when it comes to environmental, green, or progressive, and then the other help the Palestinians. We are by ourselves. We don't have really allies on campus. In fact, I don't know that we really have any fighters on campus anymore. The Jewish students are there to get an education. They are not there to fight and to lose their education or their career. So basically, there are hardly anyone that represents us on campus. And what was very successful, and you're right, is when after those resolutions passed, like in Pitzer College, the president said, I'm vetoing it, it's bullshit. And it was vetoed and canceled. And a lot of resolutions have no teeth. But Israel and the Jews are being defamed and marginalized in every one of those campuses nonstop. But now we have the same thing that started on campus in 2005, 2010, and more. Now we have it all over America. So I think we need to understand this is an American issue. It's not just campus. And for Americans to be with us, we need to emphasize and substantiate to them this is an American problem. This is the only way we can win. Otherwise, I think we're doomed.
I agree with you that it's spreading, but I'm not sure that you're right when you say there are no fighters on campus, because I know lots and lots of kids. I know a lot of kids who went to AIPAC on your fellowship.
I know, but they're not fighters. They're not fighters. I mean, in November, we had the National Student for Justice in Palestine conference here in Los Angeles, and there were no students demonstrating against the Student for Justice in Palestine. Actually, Hillel on campus told them that our way to fight back is to do a big Shabbat dinner invite all our friends for Shabbat dinner and bake a challah and drink wine, and that's the way we fight hate. That's easy, but I don't think we're fighting anything by doing Shabbat dinner and allowing the anti-Semites to celebrate on campus.
Well, except that Hillel's strategy at the time was that a large, noisy demonstration would have brought publicity to that movement in a way that ignoring it would have let it disappear in obliviousness, and that was a strategy. And it's not a bad strategy when you think about, how these movements work. I mean, they wanted to have publicity. So I'm not sure I agree with you on the strategy, but I know that
they know how to get publicity anyway. They have published every class that they took, every statement. So they're doing their own publicity. Whether we are quiet or not, we are not basically quashing it. It takes place, and they have their audience, and they have the people that raise them. And it's really up to us if we want to stand up or just close ourselves in Hillel and do nothing.
Okay. The strategy that you take, I think, is an interesting question. Is there anything that we can do as outsiders to a college campus to encourage kids or give the kids the tools they need in order to be able to fight back?
I actually have done something like this perhaps 5 to 10 years ago, and I think it was successful, but I ran out of energy. What I wanted to do is encourage kids, Jewish kids, to stand up and fight back. But I knew that they're there to get an education and get on their career. The number one thing that they want to do is have a career. They're not going to stay and be pro-Israel advocates like the Palestinians. They stay on campus for 10 and 15 years. They got salaries. They are activists, full-paid activists. They look like guerrillas over there. They're not students, and our students don't want to fight with them. So how do you encourage Jewish students to fight back? How do you help them in their career? So the idea that I had and I promoted, we called it the Student Mentor Coalition. And every student that was willing to be a pro-Israel, we had connected him with a mentor in business that helped his career. So he would give him an internship in the summer, and a lot of good career actually took place. We got a lot of people to fight, but for me it was hand-holding. I had to talk to the students a lot of time, wasted time of mentors that are very famous, didn't show up to a meeting. So it was a lot of energy for me to do, but I thought the idea of really rewarding students that are willing to fight with careers and mentorship really was a good idea, but it was a little bit bigger than I could do myself. That's one thing. The other thing, I think if we make it an American issue, then we do have a lot of partners on campus. All the Greek societies are all very, very pro-American. A lot of leaders in civic life and political life coming from the Greek society, from all the different sororities and fraternities. And if our issues are about America, not about Jews, we can get many more partners. And I'm working right now with organizations on campus that are working on American issues with students. I hardly have any Jews in those, but there is a lot of other student organizations that are starting to stand up and fight back. And I'm supporting those, and I'm trying to see what's the best way to fight with them.
Why do you think ultimately anti-Semitism is rising in America? The economy is very strong. The country is relatively peaceful in terms of its relations outside. I mean, the kind of stress factors one might look for to explain a broken society that would explain anti-Semitism. So when you look at the society, why now? What are the factors that you see in the culture that seem to be promoting this?
Well, obviously, America is changing. We're becoming more progressive and more liberal, and there is more place for those type of opinions to be expressed and being accepted. As I said, there are 3 radical movements that promote anti-Semitism, and those movements are becoming stronger these days because of different phenomena. I'm not here to explain why they're becoming so stronger, but each one of them promote anti-Semitism. And if it's the white supremacists that promote anti-Semitism, if it's the radical Muslims that promote anti-Semitism, or it's the radical left, each one of them promote anti-Semitism. They are reaching more and more people because of social media and other support that they're getting. And because we as Jews don't stand up and say this, we will not allow anti-Semitism, we kind of are quiet. We're just raising voice when we see an anti-Semitic event. It says, oh my God, Gewalt, there is anti-Semitism. We don't do anything to stop it. It become mainstream. It's become okay. If 3 months ago every incident was taking headlines, today we have incident event in the United States every day, and you don't see it. People got used to it. We don't say anything about it. The Gentiles don't say anything about it. It become like the routine, the norm, and that's what's happening, across our eyes.
Okay. We have a little time to ask some questions. I saw some people with hands up. So we'll do this in a second. We'll give you a chance to ask a question to Adam. And I just want to remind you, here at VBS, we have a quaint custom. A question is a one-sentence interrogatory that begins with the word what, when, why, where, and how, okay? If you'd like to make a speech, we'd love to hear it, later. But right now, we have a wonderful guest here who has spent a great deal of time and energy and passion on this issue, and I want to let him express himself. So if you have a question you'd like to ask Adam, and I'm not going to scrub the mic, but I'll repeat the question so that those at home can hear. All the way in the back, please. Yes. Yes, speak loudly, please. Could you do me a favor? Stand up now. Talk to us. Yeah. Okay. Can we get the government to establish a cogent definition of the difference between free speech and hate speech, and then use whatever government tools we have to fight back against hate speech? Did I get the question right? Yes. What do you think?
Well, a good question. I think in the political situation right now, it's very hard to pass resolutions like this. The State Department have actually defined what anti-Semitism is. There is the famous State Department definition of anti-Semitism that was basically introduced by Hillary Clinton during the Obama presidency, and however, this definition have never been accepted by Senate or Congress. And even to try to have the Senate and Congress approve the definition of anti-Semitism is impossible today. You know that even the condemnation of anti-Semitism, we can't even get in Congress anymore. What we're trying to do right now, we're trying to pass this anti-Semitism definition that was approved by the State Department on different state levels where perhaps those things can pass. So we have right now, we took the definition of anti-Semitism of the State Department and the definition of the International Holocaust Memorial Heritage, forgot the HER, and we created a resolution which we are trying to pass. This is something that Israeli-American Council is trying to do on different states. So we have actually drafted a resolution, and it's being promoted in Florida. So if we can have Florida or other states approve it, perhaps this way we can push it to the federal. But on the federal level, I think we are paralyzed. There's nothing that we can do there, as was evidenced lately.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. One of the claims, I think, of the left is that there's a difference between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. Personally, I can't see the difference. As a student of Jewish history, I can't see the difference. But do you think that there's a difference between...
The only country in the world that you think is doing war crimes is the Jewish country. Clearly, anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And, I mean, any test that you apply, it's clear that it's just a more popular way to be anti-Semite, to say, no, I have some friends that are Jews, nice people, hate Israel. But it's anti-Semitism in daylight. Totally agree with you.
Oh. Yes, please. Could you stand up so we can hear you? It's a big room, and we're old guys, so you have to talk loud. It's okay. Okay, good. You're a New Yorker. Schumer's your congressman. What are you talking to us for? Come on now, come on. Come on, Jerry Nadler belongs to you. Sorry, I'm kidding. Thank you for the question. The question was, no, I think your question's a very good question. I just love your accent. See, here it's exotic. When you live in L.A., that accent's exotic, right? The question is, we have a certain degree, we as a community have a certain degree of political clout. Could we use our political clout to get our leaders to speak out more forcefully and more directly about anti-Semitism that they perceive?
Unfortunately, Israel and anti-Semitism are not the main issues that our political leaders are facing. Schumer has other priorities, and he has other coalition to preserve. And even though he calls himself Shomer Israel, that's not his top priority in the Senate. And so I cannot convince Schumer to do something that's not good for Schumer. So we need to navigate what we're doing that's going to be good for Schumer to do it. If it's about America, perhaps he will find more grounds to be much more vocal and much more action-oriented. But if it's only about Jews, then he has other priorities on his plate.
I think if you go online, there was a good speech by Ted Deutsch, who is a congressman from Florida, in response to Representative Omar's comments. It was a very direct, I think you'd be pleased with what he said. Okay, but I think your strategy of saying this is an American issue, not a Jewish issue, right, I think is the right strategy. Yes, Michelle. It's a good question. So Michelle wants to know, in the employment world, there are rules that define a hostile work environment. And one can be brought up on charges for these things. Why can't we apply that same rubric or those same rules to students on university campuses who feel the hostility of anti-Semitism or anti-Israel kinds of activism?
Excellent question. So there are student rights. Title VI of the civil rights is dealing with student life. And very fortunately for us, we have right now the Undersecretary of the Education for Civil Rights. His name is Kenneth Marcus. He was the president of the Brandeis Institute in Washington. He has been fighting against anti-Semitism for a long time. And he's trying his best to apply Title VI to student rights. So, but it's not that easy. Why? In order to actually follow a complaint, somebody needs to make a complaint. A student needs to stand up and say, hey, I was harassed, I had pain and damage, but the students are not willing to stand up and speak up. They have so much to lose. They're so afraid of the administration, their professors. So we have right now, for example, a few different cases that Ken Marcus is pursuing. First of all, in Rutgers, there was an anti-Semitic professor that actually gave credit for students who did anti-Semitic work. And so there was a complaint of ZOA that this is anti-Semitic and it's violate the student rights. Under the previous administration, they closed the investigation. The Secretary of Education decided not to pursue the allegation that the professor was actually infringing on the civil rights of the students. Now, Kenneth Marcus, a year ago, decided to open the case. So he went back to 2011 to a case that was already closed by the previous Secretary of Education, and he said, I'm going to apply the anti-Semitism definition of the State Department to this case, and I'm opening it. So he's now investigating what happened in Rutgers. Now, right now in UCLA, we have the National Student for Justice in Palestine, and a lot of Jewish students felt that they were harassed by the fact it's happening on campus, and they bring anti-Semite speaker that's calling to destroy the state of Israel to campus. So we were looking for students that are willing to go to the Department of Education and complain. Well, we found one, and we actually made him available. But he's available, he's not available. I'm not sure if we can really prove damages. The problem is we don't have the student to stand up and complain. If we had, right now, we have somebody in the Department of Education that is friendly and willing to investigate. But we need the student to complain about it.
Yes, please. Where are the Hillels on campus?
Hillel are on campus. It's the center of Jewish life on campus. And Hillel is obviously being torn right now, whether they should be pro-Israel, which should advocate for Israel, or whether should be the home for the students. So the students are mostly more progressive right now. They are not that much interested to advocate for Israel. And Hillel is asking himself, what should we do? Where should we be? We should only promote Jewish life, also promote the state of Israel. Should we strengthen the state of Israel or only celebrate Shabbat? So different Hillel doing different things. It's depend. Hillel is like a franchise. Every Hillel director does what they feel is appropriate. A lot of Hillel directors are fighting for Israel, and they are advocating to fight for Israel. But a lot of other Hillel directors, Israel is no longer part of the conversation. Flags of Israel were removed. They don't talk about Israel. They don't promote Israel. Then they are just about Jewish life. So where is Hillel? You need to see what Hillel you're talking about and what's the affiliation of that Hillel director.
That's very true. What?
Antisemitism is a Jewish problem. BDS is antisemitism. But they feel that if they talk about it, they're going to alienate their own students. And they're saying, we are the parents, we are the home of the Jewish students, we need to hold their hands, and if they don't want to talk about Israel, we're not going to push them things they're not comfortable in doing. So this is the leadership of certain Hillel directors. They feel it's more important to hold the end and embrace the Jewish student, whatever they think, even if they're anti-Israel.
Okay. Yes, please. Could you? I'm sorry. I apologize. We just don't hear real well. Oh, wow. Yeah, can we, so I want to just repeat the question so everybody can hear. Can we teach high school kids Zionism, not just Jewish schools, wherever high school kids are, to become Israel advocates and proud Jews, so that when they come to college campuses where they're going to meet these movements, they know how to fight back?
It's a great question, and clearly it's not that simple. Because the students are getting a lot of ideas from their teachers, from their parents, for what's happening in America, and very few students or very few teachers or very few parents are interested in this subject. So we did try. I understand. We did try those programs on schools. We had funders from the Jewish Federation, and I funded some of it. Tried to prepare students. And we were able to, and we are still, there's different organizations today that I support that are preparing students, but this is really the minority. Most of the Jewish schools are not necessarily interested in this subject, including school here in Los Angeles. I think Eshel is a great school. I'm speaking to the kids in Eshel many times about it, but other schools don't invite me to speak. I'm just an example. There are schools that feel this is a priority, and there are schools that feel it's not a priority. So it's really depends what the schools want. There are some schools that are known as progressive schools here. They don't want to talk about Israel, advocates for Israel. So it's not that simple to prepare the kids. The question is what the parents want, what the teachers want, what the school wants, and it's a little bit more complicated.
How many kids are you sending to AIPAC?
We are bringing 300 students to AIPAC this year, every year. And we also, we do a program that I think is very efficient. We have the Milstein Family Campus Allies Mission to Israel, where we take non-Jewish student leaders to Israel through AIPAC, and those students, non-Jews, are becoming staffer for senators and congressmen, and they work chief of staff. And we even have right now a congressman on state level. I don't know, maybe he's already Bakari Seles. I don't know if he's, maybe he's on a...
He's on CNN every night.
Right, so maybe, so he actually went on our trip to Israel. So I feel it's a great investment to send non-Jewish leaders to Israel with AIPAC to come back as leaders and supporters of the U.S.-Israel alliance.
Yeah, it's a wonderful investment.
Thanks.
It's a wonderful one. Both the high school kids. So a lot of our kids go to APAC with Adams as Adams Fellows, and they come back with a tremendous sense of inspiration and learning, and they come back really as Israel advocates ready to go to college. So that's one of the great things that are done. And some of the schools do stuff. We do stuff here. We prepare the kid. We have kids who go to Jewish schools, Milken and de Toledo, but most of our kids go to public schools and private schools. And we do stuff on Israel advocacy here with them. I have a seminar that I teach, and the kids are ready to go. And they know the facts, they know what the history is. It's also a question of you're on a college campus, and my own kids face this. You're facing a demonstration. And the question is, do you want to confront that demonstration and take those people on, or is it just not what you're there for? And so sometimes it's a tough decision. My kid would tell me about crossing a campus, and they had this Palestinian apartheid wall through the campus. And I said, well, what'd you do? He said, well, one year I went up and argued with the guy. He said, and one year I was late for my class, so I just went around. And it's an interesting question about whether kids have it's a tough thing to become that kind of a person that wants to really confront. So, but I really appreciate the fellowship.
I just want to follow up. The people that are standing up with the signs are professional activists. They're being paid to stand there. Our students are going there to get education. They rush to class. They don't want to stand and argue with people. So this is different. This is why they're there all the time, making a lot of noise, and our students just prefer to get out of the way.
It's also physically intimidating, but that's another whole story.
Sure.
Yeah, in the back, please, sir. Could you do me a favor? Walk up over here and give us a one-sentence question. Good.
One of the excuses used for anti-Semitism throughout the ages is that we killed
We're okay.
God, Jesus, right? Well, we play a part in it. The Romans did it, but we...
It's religious anti-Semitism, right.
Would it be helpful for Jewish leaders like you and hundreds and thousands of Jewish rabbis and leaders to apologize for any role that we may have taken in that, saying we're very sorry if our ancestors...
So the question is, for centuries and generations, Jews were the victims of religious anti-Semitism, and in the Christian community, they were accused of being involved in deicide. That was the charge. You find it at the end of the book of Matthew, where the Jewish crowd says, "His blood is upon us." So as long as you ask the rabbi question, I'll answer the rabbi question. If you listen very carefully to Adam's presentation, which I thought was wonderful, it's not religious anymore. No, it's not. The radical Muslims don't hate us because we're Jewish, we have different faith than they do. They hate us because we're in the way of their vision of world conquest. The radical right and the radical left, it's not religious anymore. In fact, if anything, the religious community, look at the evangelical community, is the most pro-Israel community in the country right now, right? The people who are the most Verbrent Christians, Verbrent is a Christian word, Verbrent Christians are actually the most pro-Israel. So it's not religious, and that's not the cause of anti-Semitism anymore. That's point one. Point two, I'm not going to apologize for something we didn't do. Okay? There's plenty of history about this, that we didn't do that. And even the Pope, who's a pretty good Christian as far as I know, even the Pope exonerated us and demanded that those references be erased from the Christian liturgy. Now, they can't erase them from the Christian Bible, but he asked them to be taken out of the Christian liturgy because he said it's just wrong to blame the Jews for the death of Christ. It's false and it's wrong and it's immoral. So I don't think that apologizing is the thing to do. But I think the third thing I want to say about your comment, which I think was very important, we can make alliances with the Christian community. We can work with because as Adam has pointed out, it's not a Jewish problem, it's an American problem. And as Americans of faith, we have to take this very seriously. We have to take this very seriously. And I think we can build alliances with churches, both right and left churches, to take on hate of all kinds, in particular anti-Semitism. And there are Christian clergy and Christian believers and Christian activists who are ready to work with us to fight this. And that's something I think that we have to continue following Adam's example. So thank you for the question. Okay? Yes, please, ma'am. Okay, so we can't get people to, out of fear for their safety, people are never going to speak up. And what she's asking is a question, it's what your whole presentation is how do you motivate people to speak up? Is that right? When they're frightened.
As Jews, we were always frightened. We're always the minority. And if we spoke up, we paid a price. And I think we still live under the same premises, that if we stand up and speak, we'll be the targets. And I talked about this woman, young mother, that sent me the letter, and I asked her, are you willing to come public? And she said, no, it's only going to make things worse. So, but I said in my speech that today I feel it's a good opportunity to actually take action, because there are three things that are working for us. Those things are the state of Israel, the strengths of the state of Israel, the knowledge, the fact that we have brothers and sisters in Israel that are fighting the same thing, the fact that U.S. and Israel are allies. We have the state of Israel. We need to strengthen the state of Israel so that Israel can strengthen our resolve better. Number two, we do have the resources to fight back. I know that as Jews, and I speak to many Jews, they say, Adam, I can't really help you because I have so much to lose. Listen, I have a good name. My name is on the building of the university, and I have a business, and I have a family, and we can't help you. And I'm telling them, no, you need to use the resource and power that you have to fight back, because maybe in 10 years you won't have it back. So we do have the resources. In a lot of times in history, we did not have any power. This is an illusion. We do have power in America. This is in America. We are controlling many industries. We have a lot of money, many influence. We can do things. It's different today. And thirdly, it's not a Jewish problem. If we understand it's an American problem, and we reach out to our brothers and sisters, the American, we have many more people to fight with us. We should not be passive and quiet. Now is the time and the opportunity to fight back.
Thank you. Yeah. Gentlemen, all the way in the back, if you could talk loud enough so we... So the question is, thank you. The question is about Jews who support anti-Zionism and whether that gives legitimacy to an anti-Zionist point of view.
It clearly does. But let's look at it. Listen, we are Jews. And as Jews, we are split on many directions. I think when Moses sent the spies to go and check out what's happening in Israel, the 12 spies, they came back and say, this country, the inhabitants, they eat each other, they kill each other. And that was the story 4,000 years ago, and it's still today. We're very creative, we're open-minded, and every two Jews is three ideas. So we have people that are for this and people that are against this. But I look at it, here's the way I look at it. Clearly, they give a lot of credibility to Ilan Omar and the anti-Semite, the fact that Noam Chomsky and others are supporting BDS. But the way I look at it is we are constantly have assimilation. In fact, if you take the Orthodox apart, we probably have more than 60% assimilation in the United States. So constantly there are people that used to be Jews that are no longer Jews, right? And some of those Jews that are no longer Jews are against us. So I think it's just it's the people that are no longer Jews, or their kids are no longer going to be Jews, and there's nothing we can do, and we should not give them any legitimacy because they're claiming that they're Jews.
Yeah, I just if I can just have one more comment.
Please, you know more about it than me.
No, I don't. One of the phenomena that to me is so interesting, and the question you raised is an interesting question, is Jews who are embarrassed by Jewish power. We have been victims for so many generations, and we got used to being victims. And for the first time, I mean, the state of Israel is 70 years old. You understand that the War of Independence of Israel in 1948 was the first war won by Jews since 166 BCE, since the Maccabees. I mean, that's a long losing streak. That's longer than the Chicago Cubs. I mean, it's a long losing streak. We got so used to being victims. And when you're a victim, there's a wonderful thing about it. Being a victim's horrible. There's only one good thing about it. You can feel morally superior to everybody else. You can feel like, if I did have power, I'd be better than those people. Well, suddenly, Israel gives us power. And we have to deal with power. And power always demands moral compromise. And suddenly, because God has a wicked sense of humor, God puts us in the worst neighborhood in the world. And God puts us in charge of another people. And we have to figure out, what do you do with this other? How do you occupy or govern or rule over or grow, nurture this other people? We have questions and problems we've never dealt with before. And there are lots of Jews who are embarrassed by that. If you read Noam Chomsky, and I have, and his buddies, Finkelstein and these other guys, they're embarrassed by Jewish power, right? And you want to know something? I'm not embarrassed by Jewish power. My Zayda came to America not because he loved apple pie and Chevrolet. He came to America because he was running for his life. Jewish history has taught us anything. You're going to have a rifle. The question is, which side of the rifle would you like to be on? And we were on the other side of the rifle for 1,800 years. I like this side of the rifle. I don't mind having power. I know it brings moral compromise. I know it demands a great deal of us. I know we're going to argue a lot about how to use that power responsibly and ethically and in accordance with the values of the Jewish people. But I'm not uncomfortable with the fact that Jews now have power. And I'm sorry that people like Noam Chomsky are uncomfortable with this. But I'd rather the Jewish people live, and right now, in order to have power, we need to live. So I think you're right. It does lend that movement some credibility, right? But I think those of us who are not embarrassed by Jewish power should stand up and say that. I'm going to let you have the last question, because I promised Adam that he would go home tonight and have a quiet Shabbos afternoon. So here you go. Yeah. No, I tell you, because the gentleman asked me about Christians. He was talking about whether we should apologize to the Christians for any role we might have had in their narrative, and I was responding to that. I think that my experience, and it's only my experience, I'm not going to say this blanketly, my experience has been that there are some Muslim clergy who are willing to talk with us and work with us and become partners with us. Principally the ones who have been in America for a generation already. Right? The guys who were born here or educated here have internalized what America is, what American democracy is, how you live as a religious minority in America, and they have a great deal of sensitivity. Now, they're not going to be Zionists, but they have a sensitivity for our position as a minority in an American majority, and they can become partners with us. The difficulty is that much of the Muslim clergy are immigrants, and they haven't yet come to that place of understanding America. And that's the origin of the stuff that Adam was talking about, where you get some radical and very vicious, horrible kinds of things being said from Muslim clerics and Muslim pulpits. Those are people we have to do what we can to bring them into the American conversation, but we also be very careful, right? What's the phrase in Hebrew is kabdeu v'chashdeu, Let's bring them in to the extent that they're willing to engage in an American conversation, but let's be very careful about who they are and what they say, because they've brought a great deal of the hatred and prejudice and antagonism from the countries they came from to America, and they continue to spread it. So that's your question is an apt question. All right, someone got to ask Adam a question, because it's what? I have. I know. But I bring the leaders that are willing to talk to me, right? I have a standard, and my standard is, if you're going to come here and spread hate, I don't want to hear from you. But I want to bring, if he can hear me and I can hear him and we can understand each other and he can understand my perspectives on these things. I've watched people change. I mean, I really believe in change. I've watched people change out of a conversation. One last question for Adam. What? Mark? Okay.
Is anti-Semitism a psychological problem? They study these people, they lack conscience.
Is anti-Semitism a psychological problem or some other kind of problem?
I'm not an expert.
Dr.
but
Milstein.
I think it's in the genes in Western civilization. You know, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians, they don't have any sense of anti-Semitism. They never grew up on anti-Semitism. They appreciate the innovation, the smartness that come from Judaism. You know, where is the country that you have most copies of the Talmud? Korea. 50,000 copies of the Talmud. They believe this is the best guide for life. It's mandatory for them to learn the Talmud. None in the Far East.
Is this true? Is that true?
Yes, it's true.
I'm going to buy a Hyundai. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, would you join me in thanking Adam for being with us today? Thank you for your words, your wisdom, and your passion. Toda Rabba.
I made a believer out of you.
You're here because I'm a believer. I
Yeah.
appreciate what you've done. I
Thank
really
you.
do appreciate
Right,
it.
okay.
Thank you for
So we
being
can
here.
work together.
It would be an honor to work together. You know that. You know
Okay.
that. Thank you. Thank you. Kol hakavod lecha.
I enjoyed it
Kol
very
hakavod.
much.
Look at this. You have a big crowd that stayed
Yeah.
this late. Right? Take him home and let him have a rest. Magia lo menucha akshav.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Thanks for bringing the kids. It's great to see them. And kol hakavod lechem, bemet. All right, and you know, for Stand By Me, whenever you need the synagogue for Stand By Me, I understood you couldn't do the